Hello, humans. This is a case study, but I've got some information before I do the case studies because they have a theme. So this is on a statement that Tianshi used frequently. He often talked about the six yang organs, use freeing as supplementation. So let's see what that's all about. Okay. And before we talk about that, I want to make sure we're all on the same page with the background. If you're watching this, you probably know a lot of this, but just to remind you that, the Zhang and the Fu have certain characteristics each. They're not the same. The Zhang, of course, are the yin organs. And one of the chapters that talks about them a lot is Su Wen chapter 11. It says that the Zhang organs store essence qi. And what does that mean? It means purified substances. It includes, of course, kidney jing, but it means, like, this word jing means refined things. And so kidney jing is a specific type of refined things, but it means refined things. So the yin organs store refined things and they don't drain. So they're inherently full. They're supposed to be full, their normal state is full, but they don't fill up and empty, fill up and empty, fill up and empty. So there's this word, I've looked in other people's translations like Paul and Schultz, and I don't like, this word is a little difficult in this context. It's the same word that can mean excess, but it doesn't have to mean that. It frequently doesn't mean that if you're not talking about excess and deficiency. It can mean solid, it can mean the fruit of something and so forth. But this is saying they don't that they are full. That's just what they are, but they're not able to become excess. That's not exactly right, but we'll see from the discussion later in Su Wen chapter 11 that it basically means filling up and emptying. And so, the yin organs store and they don't drain. That's what that should have said. Yeah. They store and they don't drain. That part is perfectly clear. But the Fu, the yang organs, these are some various quotes from the same short paragraph, but I didn't translate the whole paragraph. The yang organs have the image of heaven. So they drain and they don't store. So what's that all about? When you think of the heavens, the sky above us, sunlight comes down, rain comes down, snow comes down, heat comes down, everything comes down from the heavens. And all the yang organs also, you eat food, it goes down into the stomach, down into the small intestine, down into the large intestine, down into the toilet. So it's this idea of starting above and moving downward that they're calling draining. And so the Fu received the turbid qi from the five zang, from the yin organs. So, do you want to hold on to turbid qi in your body or do you want to pass it through? You want to pass it through. We saw the yin organs have purified substances, but the yang organs have this turbid qi. And so they're called the transmitting and transforming Fu organs. So transmitting implies they have to keep moving, and draining is moving, among other things. So it also says the six Fu transmit and transform. We saw that up there, but they don't store. So they fill up and empty, but they're not inherently full. It flips that sentence from the Zhang And it says they fill up and empty, but they don't live in a state of fullness. So, the kidneys should always be full with Jing, and the heart should always be full with Shen, and so forth. But the yang organs should not always be full with anything. They should transmit, they should pass it through, they should drain. And here, this last passage really explains more clearly what it means. When water and grains enter the mouth, so when you eat and drink, the stomach fills up, but the intestines are empty. And then the food descends, and so now the intestines fill up and the stomach is empty. So you can see fill up and empty, fill up and empty, fill up and empty, not stay in a perpetual state of fullness. And this is important for this concept of why, to supplement the yang organs, we need to free movement, free flow. Okay. And so the thing is, if you're storing something, you pretty much want it to stay still, because if it moves around, it can spill out or stuff like that. And so when we think of the most basic function of the yin organs, it's to store, which implies stillness. But the most inherent function of the yang organs is to pass things through, which implies movement. So when yin organs become deficient, that means they lose their ability to store. And so we need to help them store more. And most herbs that supplement are going to help things gather and store and increase. Whereas when the yang organs lose their most basic function, then they don't pass things through and they just fill up, but they don't empty. And so now you have food stagnation, or you have constipation, or you have retention of urine. So it's really important that the yang organs move through. And so when they lose their function, rather than supplement, which implies adding more onto what's already accumulated, you want them to drain or to move freely, and that helps them fulfill their job, which is passing things through. So, this is just the basic table to remind you that yin organs store and don't drain, and yang organs drain and don't store. If you read Chinese, you might notice this is not exactly the right character, but that's what Neijing has, because it was written in a time before writing was quite as, like, what's the word, just everybody decided exactly how to write it. So this is still pronounced xie, and it still means drain, even though it doesn't have the water radical. And also extraordinary organs store like yin, and they don't drain. We know that yin organs are solid and yang organs are hollow, because if you want something to pass through, it has to be hollow. How could food and waste pass through a solid thing? So yeah, there's that filling up and emptying, or just being in a state of fullness. Okay, so now let's move to Ye Tianshi. He was a Qing Dynasty doctor, total genius. He really developed a lot of ideas that were different from people before him. He's the guy for Wenbing theory. He developed the concept of Wei Qi Ying Shui. He also wrote a lot about the 8 extraordinary vessels and what herbs to use to treat them. And, he did a bunch of other brilliant stuff. So you can see the date of this book. This book was actually written by his students after he died. They got together and they, combined all kinds of case studies that they had taken notes on when they were following him around. And so they organized it into topics, like here's all the cases on vomiting, and here's all the cases on diarrhea, and so forth. And then at the end of each section, one of them wrote a little of some paragraphs about Ye Tianshi and how he treated that particular thing. There's very little theory as you're going through the cases. There's snippets of theory, but he's not explaining everything, or his students are not explaining everything. But then there are explanations at the end sometimes. So, he frequently said things like here it's the stomach fu. So does that mean the stomach organ or the stomach and the fu? Whatever, take freeing as supplementation. The six fu, take freeing as supplementation. You can see this is found in a few different places. Um, the six fu freeing means supplementing, something like that. Freeing the six fu is supplementation. When the six fu become ill, take freeing as supplementation. You can see, like, this is all the same concept, just phrased a little differently in different places. Some of this is in the discussion, some of this is in a case here and there. So I have a couple cases for you, but again, why is freeing movement supplementation for the six fu? Because the basic job for the six fu is to move things through, to transmit, to pass things through, and to drain as opposed to hold on to things. It wants to drain things away, not store things. And so if you want to make the six fu do their function better, then you have to help them transmit, you have to help them drain, which means freeing the flow. The six fu are more likely to have excess conditions and obstructions than they are to have true deficiency. So, okay, sorry. So, here we go. Here we go. Let's look at a case. I have two cases here. This case is from volume 1, and it's in the section on, I forget what it's called, but taxation, somebody who's just exhausted. And so this is somebody named Lee who's 36 years old. His pulse was small and weak, and his body was emaciated. So, deficiency, we're thinking deficiency. He had suffered intestinal wind for a long time. What is intestinal wind? It means blood in the stool. It could be bleeding hemorrhoids, it could be bloody stool, and it's often associated with extreme deficiency. And remember, this is in the section on taxation. So even by knowing which section this is in, we know this guy is very deficient. But his chief complaint relates to the intestines, and he's emaciated, which also means his spleen stomach is probably not doing a good job. In recent years, his food intake decreased and he had difficult defecation, but he felt better when he belched or if he passed gas. So you can see when the food moved, when stomach chi moves, when intestinal chi moves, he felt better, felt more comfortable. Then he says that sentence, the six fu take freeing as supplementation. So Ye Tianshi, I copied Li Dongyuan's idea of a formula that's called Tong Yu Tang, which is Tong is freeing, the same freeing we've been talking about. Yo is like dark or obscure or secluded, but also the dark gate refers to the pylorus, the yoman. And so that's what people interpret this as meaning. And tong, of course, is a decoction. So this is a formula from Piwei Lun, which is written by Li Dongyuan. And it basically moistens the intestines and frees obstruction in the intestines. So instead of like saying, oh, we better supplement his spleen chi and nourish blood or, whatever, or instead of saying, let's, give him da huang tang because he's too weak for that, I mean, like, sorry, da chang chi tang, he's too weak for those kinds of formulas, but so he needs supplementation. His symptoms are in the Fu organs, but we're not going to give him standard supplementing herbs. We're going to give him freeing herbs. Let's see what kind, though, that Ye Tianshi uses. The three that are in like a darker cell of the table are from that original formula Tang Yo Tang. Tong Yo Tang, yeah. And then the ones that are not the darker color are ones that are not in the original formula. So there's something else I wanted to say. Oh, I know this phrase Tongyo actually is a phrase. Let's go back and look at it. Okay. Tong Yo, these two characters, that by itself is a phrase apparently from a Tang Dynasty poem. I didn't know this till I Googled it. It's a phrase from a Tang Dynasty poem that isn't about intestines or medicine, but it's talking about a secluded, winding path through a garden or through a forest or something like that. Well, doesn't that have the image of the intestines? A secluded, dark, winding path. Yeah. So there's that image there too. Okay, so then there are a bunch of other herbs, and also in that formula Tongyo Tang, there are other herbs that Ye Tianshi didn't use, but he added in Yuli Ren, which is in the moist laxative category. It's a heavy oily seed, and Tao Ren, which is in the original, is also an oily seed that moistens the intestines, and Lu Hui is like aloe something, and that can is used to treat chronic constipation. That's not its point category, but it is a herb that can treat that chronic constipation. And most of the other herbs are also moistening. Dangui is moistening. And the other herbs like songzi, oh, it lost the tone on the song. That's like pine nuts, pine seeds, another oily seed. And baizubren is an oily seed, but this is shuang. It's some kind of frost that's made out of baizubren. So you can see lots of oily seeds which have downward movement and are moistening. And so those are going to free the intestines. The only herb that's really supplementing is dongui. But of course, dongui is not pure supplementation. It has a lot of moving ability in it too, and it's moistening. So the effect of this formula is moistening and descending, which will free the intestines. But this formula is not a supplementing formula, but for the Fu organs, that is just what they need, and that would be counted as supplementation, according to Ye Tianshi. We have one more case. There are other cases, but I picked the two cases that just have one treatment and were relatively short. Some of the other cases might have multiple treatments within the same case. And so, these are the simple ones that are easy to put in. So here's a second one. It's from volume 5. It says in this particular case, deficiency of the Yangming stomach Fu organ was due to vomiting and counterflow that went on for a long time. So this person had been vomiting a lot, and that made his stomach deficient. Doctors gave him acrid herbs. Why? I don't know. But, in cases, they're always complaining about what other doctors did. Doctors gave him acrid herbs, which consumed qi and broke qi, like smashed qi apart, like really damaged qi, and also plundered fluids. So his chi was dispersed by the acrid herbs, and the fluids were dried up by the acrid herbs. And so now stomach chi could not govern downward flow. And because stomach chi wasn't moving down, then the intestines weren't moving down either. So this made, the transmitting function of the intestines fail. And then it says, the classic says, and this is a fake quote. Ye Tianshi or his students did that a lot. They say the classic says, and you look and you look and you look, and it's not just that they paraphrased it, but like, yeah, they didn't say anything really like that. But this is his understanding, like, of like the whole picture instead of really a quote from the classics. So when it says the classics says, that usually means Su Wen, maybe Ling Shu, maybe Shang Han Lun. This sentence isn't there, but this is his sentence. The six fu take freeing as supplementation. Actually, Googling it, you find that there's really nobody who talked about it before Ye Tianshi. There are people who talk about it after him. So this seems to be his concept. Anyway, so only half a month of skillfully using freeing supplementation was effective. So, 2 weeks or 15 days of this concept of freeing, freeing as supplementation, and the patient was better. And he says, skillfully using, he's bragging a little bit. And I'll point out here that he says the thing that's translated skillfully is gong fu. So he's got gong fu when it comes to freeing as supplementation, which of course means skill. It doesn't just mean martial arts, it means skill. So how could one simply rectify dryness? In other words, if you just give moistening herbs but you don't free it, that's just going to accumulate dampness or something else. You got to get it moving too. So I discussed sweet cold herbs to clear and supplement stomach yin. Let's see what he did. Shengdi Huang, but fresh. In other words, dig it out of the ground and use it before it's even dried. If you live in certain places of China, you can do that. Here, not so much. Qianmendong to nourish yin. So we're, cooling and nourishing and moistening with these herbs. Some ginseng, which is, sometimes considered moistening depending on, how it's processed and so forth. So you can see there is some supplementation here. But what about the freeing part? Asian pear flesh. I mean, it just says sweet pear flesh, but they don't mean the kind of pears I can find in this regular grocery store here in Los Angeles. They mean Asian. He means Asian pears. And so Asian pear goes to the lung and stomach channel. It engenders fluids, moistens dryness, clears heat, and resolves phlegm. Treats fever with damage to fluids, thirst, including the thing that's kind of like diabetes, wasting thirst or dispersion thirst, hot cough, phlegm heat that causes fright mania, choking, and constipation. Don't use it if there's spleen deficiency or loose stools, because it's going to make the stools more moist. We think of it often as going to the lungs, but lungs are metal like large intestine. And unprocessed white honey means purified honey, but it's not cooked. Honey moistens the intestines also. So, here we are actually pretty moistening and supplementing, but still with, these herbs, it's going to help chi move downward. Yeah, it's going to free by moistening. So the goal is not just let's moisten him and make dampness, but they also want some that might have a little bit of a downward movement to it, like Di Huang, is heavy and will anchor things, and honey has a downward movement and so forth. So, okay. Those are the couple of cases. But before I go, I want to mention that even the reason I thought about doing this little video was because I was talking to a class I teach about point functions. And, this is in one of the schools, one of the regular required classes. And, one of the things you might notice in terms of acupuncture is that, um, you know, people use the back shoe points much more often to supplement and not so often to drain. And people use the back shoe points for the zang, the yin organs, much more than they use them for the fu organs. In fact, Neijing, Suwen, and Lingshu don't even talk about back shoe points for the yang organs. They only talk about back shoe points for the yin organs, and they're mainly used to supplement. The UN source points are also said to bring UN qi to their organ and therefore to supplement it. But that's really only the yin channels that we use them that way on. On the yang channels, like I don't think most people think of Li4 as supplementing. Sure, it can be in a point formula that does supplementation, but it's not a point that you would think by itself supplements anything. So that's a UN point of a yang channel. And again, the UN points of the yin channels were mentioned in Lingshu 1, and the yang channels, the UN points weren't mentioned until Nanjing, a later classical text. So, I think this kind of embodies the idea that, these points are supplementing on the yin channels, but on the yang channels, they're not so much about supplementation and they're a bit more about moving because we don't need to supplement. I mean, when do you ever think of small intestine deficiency? At least I never do. When do you think of um, urinary bladder deficiency? Sure, we think of kidney deficiency, but urinary bladder deficiency, not really. So sometimes we talk about spleen and stomach deficiency, but I think most of the time we don't say stomach deficiency. Or if it is like we treat like the spleen's back shoe point along with the stomach's back shoe point, the focus is still going to be on the spleen, but stomach can easily have excess. There can be stomach fire, there can be counterflow stomach chi, there can be food stagnation. So yeah, stomach we sometimes mention is deficient, but not as much as the yin organs. And then the only one that I think is a little bit different is gallbladder, because gallbladder is also an extraordinary organ, which means extraordinary organs are supposed to store like the yin organs. And we do talk about gallbladder deficiency, although it's not the most common pattern. And in CAM, when they have a point formula for insomnia due to gallbladder deficiency, they use GB40, which is the UN point of the gallbladder. So yeah, the UN points on the yang channels can supplement, but mostly we don't really think about the yang organs as having deficiency. So the take-home idea is that for yin organs, we want to supplement by gathering more resources for them. For yang organs, if they lose their function, the way we make them happy again is by helping them to move freely. And even if the patient is deficient, so we use gentle herbs, we're still not really trying to gather things for the yang organs. We're trying to gently move things through. And so for the yang organs, freeing is supplementing. Okay, so that's my little talk for today.